You ever sit in a place so fancy, so suffocatingly rich, that you can feel every unspoken rule pressing against your skin like you're one false move away from setting off an alarm no one else can even hear? Yeah, that was me 36,000 feet in the air, first class, sipping the kind of silence money buys. But before you picture some movie star or oil magnate, let me set it straight on just Naomi Williams. And on that day, I was about to find out how little all my success mattered to some people. So there I was, dressed in my favorite Navy suit, curls tied back neat, reading a dull industry report when the flight attendant's voice cut through the jazz and champagne like a cold slap. I'll remind you one last time. Move to the back of the plane immediately, or I'll have to call security. She didn't whisper, she projected, and let me tell you, that tone wasn't about airline policy. It was a test, pure and simple. Everyone in that gilded cabin heard her, but nobody said a word. Most of them just stared, faces blank or vaguely annoyed, hiding behind their glasses of Dom Perignon and their own privilege. I looked up calm. I hoped Dan just met her glare. I've already said I'm not moving. This is my seat. My voice came out steady, not cold or combative, because I'd learned long ago, when you look like me, anger is a luxury you can't afford. She was tall, all sharp edges, blonde hair yanked into a bun so tight I half wondered if it hurt. Laura Reed, her name tag read, and her eyes told you she was used to being in charge. Her lips curled just enough to make her meaning clear. You don't belong here. You know what I mean? There's a way some people look at you like you're the mistake in a perfect picture. Excuse me, but you must be in the wrong seat. This cabin is for our most important guests. Her words were dipped in that special kind of politeness that only exists to remind you of your place. I could feel the tension building, but I kept my tone level. I suggest you double-check the passenger list before making assumptions. I didn't want a scene. I just wanted respect. Still, every head in that plush cabin seemed to swivel, waiting to see what would happen next. Laura didn't budge. She hissed, "I don't need to check anything. I know who belongs here." Her pride was like armor, and in that moment, she was ready for war. So I picked up my phone, sent a short message, and let the whole thing play out quiet, calm, watching the sky outside as the world inside tightened like a noose. That's the thing about prejudice. It doesn't shout, it suffocates. People started whispering. I could feel their eyes on me, some curious, others annoyed, a few even supportive, though nobody said a word out loud. The only break in the tension came from the gentle voice of Grace, a junior flight attendant with kind eyes, who seemed genuinely sorry as she approached. "Ma'am, I'm so sorry, but Miss Reed insists you move to economy class." I could see her hands shaking, so I softened. "Grace, right? Maybe you could ask Miss Reed to double-check the manifest. She's making a big mistake." That tiny momenta, a young woman caught between conscience and orders brought a flicker of humanity back into the room. For a second, it looked like maybe things would shift. But Laura doubled down. "Who do you think you are, threatening me?" "Grace, follow my orders." Grace hesitated, the kind of hesitation that speaks louder than words. That's when the passengers started muttering louder. "She's out of line, why is she picking on her?" And you could feel the tide turning. Then, just as the air grew thick enough to cut, a voice rang out. James Hunter, a sharp-suited businessman who'd been watching in silence, now stood up, his tone clipped and cold. "Miss Reed, I suggest you check the manifest before making any more threats. This is uncomfortable for all of us." Laura's face went crimson. She snapped, "This is an internal matter. Please let us handle it." Then she threatened Grace with her job if she didn't comply. You could see the shame burning in Grace's eyes as she stepped back on the verge of tears. I sat up a little straighter. "Miss Reed, if you persist, you'll have to answer for it." She scoffed. "Someone like you can't do anything to me." That's when she crossed the final line. She stormed off, grabbed a tray of drinks, and came back with a glare that could freeze the sun. Then, making a show of it, she tripped, spilling ice water all over me. "Why would you stick your foot out like that?" she shouted, loud enough for the world to hear. I dabbed at my soaked suit, met her eye, and said evenly, "Miss Reed." I remained seated. "You came to me. I expect professionalism. Around us, The passengers began to murmur, now more in my favor than hers. Laura couldn't stand it. She raised her voice, accusing me of sneaking into first class, her voice trembling with outrage and pride. And then, when it was clear she'd lost the crowd, she did the unthinkable. She slapped me, hard, right across the face. Yeah, that happened. The sound echoed through the cabin. For a heartbeat, nobody moved, nobody breathed. My cheek stung, but I looked her dead in the eye. The power shifted in an instant. James Hunter barked, "Miss Reed, you've just assaulted a passenger. That's beyond unacceptable." Outrage spread, passengers yelling for justice, some pulling out their phones to record. Laura realized, finally, she'd gone too far. Her hands shook, her face drained of color. She started to plead, "I didn't know. Please, I'm sorry." But there was no going back. Not after all that. Then came the twist no one expected. The captain himself, Mark Donovan, calm as ever, emerged from the cockpit. He walked straight down the aisle and stopped at my seat. "Ladies and gentlemen, there's something you need to know. The woman who's been insulted and attacked today isn't just a passenger. She's Naomi Williams, CEO and owner of Skylux Aviation." If you could bottle shock, that's what swept through the cabin. Eyes went wide, jaws dropped, whispers turned to gasps. Laura's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. She tried to stammer an apology, but her words were lost in the wave of support that now crashed toward me. Passengers applauded, some openly chastising Laura. Grace, now standing taller, smiled at me with relief and pride. The captain didn't mince words. "Miss Reed, you are relieved of your duties, effective immediately. You will be held accountable for your actions." Tears streamed down Laura's face as she collapsed to the floor, begging for forgiveness. I looked at her, not with anger, but with the steady resolve that comes from knowing you're right. "Apologies don't mean much without responsibility, Laura. You showed the world exactly why we need to be better." A pair of officers boarded, calm but firm, to escort Laura off the plane. She pleaded with me, "One last time, please, Mrs. Williams, don't ruin my life." I answered, quietly but clearly, "Forgiveness means nothing without accountability. If I let you off, who's next?" The applause that followed wasn't for might, was for the idea that justice, just this once, had won out. The aftermath? Well, the media ate it up. Laura faced charges, was sentenced to community service, and had to pay damages. But the real story was back at Skylux, where I brought in new policies, real anti-bias training, promoted Grace for her courage, and made sure every single employee learned that dignity isn't negotiable. Not in my company, not in my sky. 6 months later, flying first class didn't feel tense anymore. The service was warm, the atmosphere light, every no matter their seat, their skin, their story treated with respect. Grace, now lead attendant, greeted me with a proud smile, and for the first time, I felt like the future could actually be different. I leaned back, watching the clouds roll by, thinking true victory isn't power, it's the chance to make the world better, one hard choice at a time. So, let me throw it to you. If you'd been in my shoes that day, would you have kept your cool? Would you have stood your ground? Or would you have walked away to keep the peace? Tell me what you think. Where's the line between forgiveness and justice, between compassion and consequence? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Hit like if this story hit home, and subscribe for more true stories that might just change how you see the world. Thanks for listening. I'll catch you in the next flight.